Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. You're not going to want to miss later on in the program. Yeah, roller derby girls. I'm not joking. But first, on the serious side, conservative thought on a college campus, it can't be. Brian Domitrovic,
you got it right.
Glad to have you here.
It's great to be here.
Now, you are the visiting fellow up at the University of Colorado for conservative thought and policy. That is a wonderful academic, you just can't. Let me put it in English. You're the token conservative on a very liberal campus. Is that the better way to put it?
That is too true. Boulder has a reputation, maybe like Berkeley, California, or Ann Arbor, Michigan, as being very liberal, both in terms of the townies and the professors, and Boulder wants to make sure that the vibrant academic tradition of conservatism.
Now, I'm a survivor of the University of Boulder, University of Colorado Boulder, through the econ department. And I got to tell you, it's a Marxist campus up there. There is no problem society has that good central planning cannot take care of. As a matter of fact, the whole city does that. And these poor kids go through this, and they're indoctrinated. And I'm thrilled that there's this program out there to at least bring a token. What hacks me off is that your salary is made possible through private donations of people who care about higher ed, where everybody else is being paid for by the state. I'm sorry, I'm going to whine. That ain't fair.
Yeah, I mean, my preference is that the model for the visiting scholar and conservative policy become the model for the university. I mean, I'd rather everybody's salary were paid out of private resources, out of, say, an endowment instead of federal funding or the little bit now that comes from the states. I mean, if anything needs to be followed, it's the old model before government started funding universities, where those big, powerful endowments pay for education.
Well, now you're an academic. Before you were at the University of
Sam Houston State.
Houston State in Houston. All right. Why is there such a prevalent political bias on college campuses? I mean, it's one of the reasons why think tanks like the Independence Institute started up 30 years ago. It's why Cato Institute and Heritage and AEI came up, because conservative academics couldn't get their work published or even get funded through universities. Why is there this bias?
Academics have been that way for a long time. So if you're a conservative who wants to go into academia, you know that you have a major fight on your hands. So the path of least resistance for intellectually inclined conservatives is simply to go into another profession, business, law, journalism, entrepreneurialism, you name it, because the resistance is so high. If that resistance ever flagged, I think you'd see a flood of conservatives in academia.
When you say resistance, paint a picture with that. What does that resistance look like?
Yeah, it's usually pretty insidious and pretty difficult to notice, but in terms of, say, hiring faculty members, any committee that's worth its salt in the Progressive Academy will figure out a way to kind of siphon out anybody who looks like they're doing something conservative.
You mean the undesirables? And by the way, when we say conservative, I think a lot of people think social conservative, moralistic, crusader, focus on the family, we're talking economic, free market, limited government policies. That for you and I is what conservative means.
That's what we're talking about.
All right, so you're not teaching anything about the power of marriage in your classes.
Particularly not. Yeah, in my classes now. Yeah.
The idea of higher education, I thought, particularly in liberal classes, liberal arts, is that you're supposed to get a diversity of ideas, that this prepares you to be a well-rounded person. And having survived CU, I can attest, our kids are not getting that.
Yeah, that's sad to see. I mean, I've seen it many times in the modern university, is that professors seem to have a different attitude, the liberal progressive professors, and that is we have to debunk the ideas that the students come in with. And so they set up this straw man, our students are conservative and we have to make them unconservative. I don't know, maybe they're not conservative. Maybe they're liberal and you have to introduce them to new ideas that are conservative. That would be a healthier attitude.
When you've done this for years, what's the biggest surprise when you sit down with college kids, from the beginning to the end? What hits them as, I never really thought of it that way?
The college kids that I teach now respond so well, so favorably to the conservative intellectual tradition, it's stunning. When we advertise, say, reading groups, there is a response of hundreds. I sometimes think actually thousands. at CU-Boulder because there's so much latent interest in this stuff that isn't being served.
Again, give a label to this stuff. Give a definition for people who don't quite get, because they hear conservative, you're scary. There you are wearing a tie, you're scary. What is it?
For example, this Saturday, we're doing a private reading group for students at CU. It'll be a good group. We're reading James Buchanan, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, and for his work in public choice economics, showing how the government doesn't know how to run itself. We're reading Milton Friedman. We're reading F.A. Hayek, all these anti-Keynesians. And the students really want to hear that because all they've heard is progressive economics their whole lives.
I remember my macroeconomics classes right from the start. Money supply and how the Fed can manipulate this and how they do this. Phillips curve stuff that we can find the right stuff on that. And you've got a bunch of kids with mush in their heads and going, oh, okay. I didn't feel right about it, but I was very much alone. Do you get kids who go, I've been waiting for this, or are they just not dialed in as much?
Oh no, I get kids who are just waiting for this. I'm serious when I say that there are hundreds of students who respond to this kind of stuff that I can count just at CU-Boulder. It's funny you mentioned the Phillips curve, because two of my students in my office hours yesterday just said, I can't believe the Phillips curve is still in our textbook. It's so ridiculous.
For those not knowing, the idea that there's a correlation between unemployment and inflation, and you can choose one of the two evils. Right. And until we had stagflation, lo and behold, you get both of the evils, and they're not actually. There's no causation between the two. But yeah, it was in textbooks when I went to school. As far as a philosophy, the liberty philosophy that the American experiment was devised on individualism, on the ability that to pursue happiness, government is there to protect your liberty and not there to direct you. How do students react to that? And how do you get that message across in a way that's actually effective in the 21st century?
Here I think the Boulder environment is superior to some of the other left-wing environments in this country.
Really?
Because I see the libertarianism starting to shine through in Boulder. Is it because of the marijuana? Is it because of the Bitcoin machines that are right next to some of the pot shops? I don't know. But I do see a lot of latent libertarianism in Boulder, even among what otherwise might be regarded as progressive types. I'm not so sure you see that as much in the other leftist readouts in this country. So it's been a little bit more pushing on an open door.
We've got a fellow at the Independence Institute who says, so many of Colorado's hardcore liberals are just one good economics lesson away from being libertarian. That they understand freedom. And when it comes to the right to be able to have private relationships, if you want to have a partner who's the same gender, they understand it when it comes to pot, that government shouldn't be doing this. They understand it with all these things. And then you get to financial rights. And they'll be, well, but the minimum wage is good. And you go, wait a second, I thought you said free adults should be able to have relationships they want. Doesn't that include financial relationships? They're open to this.
That's exactly what I have noticed, that we are just on the threshold of perhaps a pretty big revolution in terms of bringing in some fellow travelers, some compatriots in this movement. Yeah, no, I think it's right there.
In higher education. This is the part that gets me, because my image is this, that we used to have colleges that taught free market economics. And then we had the free speech movement, which was all about free speech, apparently, and different ideas. And that free speech movement has now grown so old, it is an anti-free speech movement. For the way that you've basically said, we will weed out people who don't think there's a governmental solution to things.
Yeah, I mean, Mario Savio from Berkeley is rolling in his grave, the free speech movement guy from 1964, because, I mean, his heirs are all completely opposed to free speech. But I think what we've seen, say, at Yale or Missouri or wherever, these people are really scared. They know that their ideas are really poor, and so they have to make sure that other ideas are disallowed because they know their ideas cannot win in the marketplace.
Give me one of your lessons that you'd give to a beginning class in conservative thought, something that would make them think a little differently. Is there a particular story that works? Is there a bit of history that works? Does the founding actually matter to them, or is that just kind of stuffy old man stuff?
One thing I talk about all the time in my classes is the great tradition of American economic growth. And what I show is that what we've experienced in the 2000s is really pathetic compared to what America's been capable of in the past. I mean, usually we do things like create 10 million jobs every decade. And there is a mass abundance in this country. There's nobody like looking for work. How am I going to get by? Am I going to do better than the last generation? No. We used to succeed en masse, and I have all sorts of stories about this, and that hits home because students are getting sick of this stagnation we've dealt with in the 21st century.
Is there a feeling for their own lives, that feeling of, I'm not going to do better than my folks. My folks will have done better. And I remember growing up, there was this feeling of, from my father that, hey, I'm doing better than my dad did, and he was doing better than his dad did, and you're going to do better than I did. Kids today don't feel that.
I know. That's why I make sure to tell them that this is entirely new. This is the first generation in all of American history to have that consciousness, and they get mad about that, as they should.
But don't they then say, what is the government going to do about it? Do they actually get the connection that it's the government stopping them from having a better life than their parents? Do they get that, or does that? Because I believe they are almost inbred with an idea that for every problem there is a governmental solution. You can't listen to National Public Radio without that inference behind every story. They have that. They're going to a state-run university. Can you really snap them out of it?
In the 15 weeks that I'm given to them for every class, we go over virtually every aspect of governmental policy that has undercut economic growth in this country's history, and those are legion. Virtually every single recession that has ever happened in American history was occasioned by public policy, and every single recovery was occasioned by the departure of public policy. This is the theme of my classes, and we have a good time with it.
I talked to one of your predecessors, Steve Hayward. And Steve, who was the first guy in your position, he took it for a year, and there was another guy, now you've got it for a year, visiting professor. He said, I love the other academics there. I'm getting along great with the other professors. And I said, yeah, because you're going to be there for 1 year. You're not tenured. You're not part of their hiring system. You're not weighing in on other people being like you. So you're not a threat. You're just a token. Do you feel the same way?
The economics department and the other academics I've been with have been very welcoming to me, I suppose, just as they were with Steve. I think there is a change in the wind at Boulder. I think it's understood that the big liberal progressive run in academia might be getting a little long in the tooth. And it's time to realize that the next generation might not be as tolerant of these liberal pieties, and so it's time to start acclimating to it. I do detect that sea change.
Quick last question. People are listening to us and they're going, I don't believe this guy, this is snake oil. Yeah. Where do you suggest people go for that first kind of freedom lesson? Is there a website, is there an organization, that kind of thing for people who want to dip their toe in a philosophy that people and free relationships between people can do better for society than a government plan?
Sure. Why not go to the Liberty Fund website? I mean, they have an absolutely rich tradition right there, most of it full text, of all the greatest classics in the tradition of liberty in this country and abroad. I'd go to the Liberty Fund's website.
Well, you're an academic. What if you need something dumbed down for a guy like me?
Yeah. Well, then I would suggest my own Forbes column. How
there
about that?
There we go. Perfect. Yeah. Where do we find the Forbes column?
Forbes.com. You can Google my name.
Terrific. Hey, Brian, thank you. Best of luck, and stay away from the frat houses.
Yeah.
You're not going to believe this one. Stay tuned.